land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might be here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. And we're mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of the generations to come. So I'll call the meeting to order, and I see that we've got all of the council here tonight. And I wonder if CEO Morris would just let us know which staff are involved on this meeting.
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chair. We have the full management team here this evening, owing to the budget discussion that's occurring later. So that includes Paul McMunn, Art Manhire, Julia Crowder, Terry Costello, Janet Quazile is here. We have Chief McGilvery with us this evening. And of course, we have our Deputy Clerk, Nadine Bennett.
Thank you. I'm looking at this agenda. Are there any changes that Council wishes to bring forward on the agenda tonight? Thought there was going to be one perhaps, but I guess not. Oh no, I know it's coming up in one of the director's reports. Thank you. Are there any, hearing none, we'll go forward with that agenda. Any disclosures of monetary interests? Seeing none. We do have a delegation. Natalia Kelbas is with us from Hempson, and she's going to, and welcome Natalia, you're going to walk us through a brief overview of the development charges report. And council and the public will remember that this came up quite a while back. And so tonight we're going to get a refresh. And then at the end of that, we're going to talk about some next steps. So Natalia, if you want to take over, and it's all yours.
Great, thank you very much, Mayor, and good evening, Council. It's a pleasure to be in front of you. As noted, I'm going to go through a fairly brief presentation, just refreshing everybody on the development charges study and the bylaw, and then getting to some of the next steps that we'll need to get through for the process. So I'll go over the background as to why we're doing the study and what it means for the town of Smiths Falls. I'll go over briefly of the development forecast that's included in the DC background study, as well as the capital program that is the basis for calculating the rates. We'll show you the rates. Again, they haven't changed really at all since they were shown to you last time, but there have been a few minor modifications. So we just wanted to show you the latest rates that we have calculated. And then lastly, we'll talk about some implementation options and the next steps for the process. So the town of Smiths Falls does not currently charge DCs, and so any development related costs are paid for through property taxes, utility rates, as well as direct developer contributions. Typically, development charges are levied by municipalities that are experiencing growth to fund for infrastructure that is related to said growth. With the development that has been occurring in the town of Smiths Falls and it's planned to continue in the next 5 to 10 years, council felt it was important to introduce development charges, or at least to explore introducing development charges to recover some of the costs related to this development. Development charges, the Development Charges Act itself is what is the legislation that we use that governs the majority of the work that we do. And there's a few requirements that are needed to pass a DC bylaw. So that includes publishing a development charges background study. I believe we've prepared one, and I hope council has been made aware and that has been circulated. If not, that will be made available publicly. I see nodding. Okay, that's great. So that report is available for council and will be made publicly available on the town's website shortly after this presentation. Another requirement is to hold one public meeting. Council may choose to hold additional ones, but the requirement is to have at least one. And then council may pass the bylaw, which will be in effect for a maximum of 5 years. It could be less, but the maximum legislative permitted Length is 5 years. So the study process that has been undertaken is fairly extensive, and we thank staff for their hard work and participation throughout the process. I won't go into too much detail about each of the steps, but in general, the requirements are such that we must forecast the location, amount, and type of development within the town. Related to that, we have to analyze the capital costs that are related to that development, what types of services will need to expend certain capital throughout the lifetime of the bylaw. Then we do need to make a series of legislated reductions, including benefit to existing, which I do have in a couple of slides. We do need to account for any grants or other contributions from upper level government or other entities. And then we do have to look at a benefit beyond the 10-year planning horizon, which we've identified in the background study. And you'll see some services do have some amounts that are in that post period or post 2030 benefiting period. What we are left with after all of these reductions is the actual cost that is eligible for recovery from growth. And that is split between residential and non-residential growth, where residentially it's levied on a per unit basis. And non-residentially, it is levied on a per square meter or per square foot of gross floor area for non-residential development. As I mentioned, we are just showing a brief summary of the development forecast. The details of all the tables, the background that goes into these calculations is available in the DC report under Appendix A for the development forecast. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of growth forecasted for the town of Smith Falls, or at least relative to your most kind of recent last 10 years or last 20 years, such that you are currently anticipated to exceed your official plan targets, which is your 2031 targets, sometime in 2023. And so this is, why it's quite important to introduce development charges for yourselves, as you may want to recover some of the costs associated with this development. And moving into the capital program. So as I mentioned, there are a series of reductions that we've had to make, and I hope everybody can see the screen. What we've tried to do is summarize all of the services that have been considered. That includes library, parks and recreation, fire protection, police services, as well as development-related studies. And then on the engineered or kind of hard services, we've considered public works, roads and related, and water and wastewater services. And the total net municipal cost identified is at around $17.3 million. You can see that most of that is related to the engineering capital program of $11.3 million, but there is a fairly significant of almost $6 million over the 10 years related to the general services. The next column over to the right is that replacement and benefit to existing that I had mentioned earlier. This is any replacement of existing infrastructure or assets that would be considered benefiting existing population under the legislation. We've made those reductions, and that's fairly significant at $9.4 million. The next column over is any available DC reserves. As you currently don't have a DC charge, we have not made any reductions as there are no available reserves. And then the last column, I'll jump over to the last column and then come back to the one before. The total DC eligible cost for recovery totals $6.5 million, again, over the 10 years for both engineered and general services. The column just before that, called post 2030 benefit, this is any costs that are related to development but are ineligible to be collected under this 5-year bylaw. They may be considered for recovery under subsequent DC bylaws, but at this point in time, they're ineligible, although still growth related. And so the actual calculated rates, I believe we've shown these ones to you, but again, there might be slightly different as we've made a few minor adjustments. On the table on the left side of the slide, you'll see that the single and semi-detached units are going to be charged $12,500 per unit. Rows and other multiples such as townhouses would be charged $10,000 per unit. And lastly, apartments at $7,500 per unit. And the difference between the unit types is based on occupancy patterns of those units. So fewer people tend to live in apartments than in single detached homes and therefore attract a lower charge. The graph that you see here on the left side of the slide is what is comprising the rates. So you'll see that the large majority of the rates are related to wastewater, water, and roads and related, making up about 60% of the pie. And then you'll see parks and recreation is another fairly significant share at about 16% of the overall rate. And in terms of how you compare with other municipalities within the geographic area, with this list, you fall at about halfway mark. We would note rates go quite a bit higher than what we've included here. We've only included the outside of the Greenbelt Ottawa rates, but there are inside the Greenbelt, which are quite higher. And then of course, the GTA has much more significant rates, but they also experience significant growth pressures. So it's always a relative comparison. We don't like to include anything too high. But as you might be aware, other municipalities like yourselves still don't have development charges, and they would have a zero development charge rate. We've just included the ones that do have rates. One other note is that there are some municipalities that are undertaking a review of their development charges and maybe increasing their rates over the next few months or even over the next year. So this is a point in time comparison. And so looking at the non-residential rates, we've calculated a uniform rate for all non-residential development at $78.52 per square meter. You'll see that the graph or the pie graph on the left looks a little bit different from the residential. This is just because we don't attribute any parks and recreation or library capital costs to non-residential development. And so once those components are removed, you'll see that the water, wastewater, and roads makes up an even greater share of the pie, which is quite common across all municipalities. And so similarly for the non-residential rates, you don't fall anywhere to the top or to the bottom of this list. And some municipalities don't levy non-residential development charges. But as you can see, there are municipalities that are quite a bit above yourselves, and some of them charge quite a bit less. So as I've gone through the actual rates, one of the things we wanted to highlight to council is that there are some options for implementing these rates. What we've calculated are the maximum permissible rates under the legislation. Should council want to not implement the fully calculated, there are some options, one of which being a phased-in approach where you could increase incrementally over a certain period of time to the maximum calculated rates, or you could implement rates lower than the fully calculated for the entire duration of the bylaw. The only caveat with this approach being that any reduction in the rates would be a loss of revenue that would have to be made up from other sources, mainly property taxes, and that you cannot cross-subsidize or you can't fund foregone DC revenue from higher DCs. But I'm more than happy to talk about some other implementation options if council has any questions or comments on this. And so lastly, the next steps for the process, what we're showing you today is an overview of the rates. As I've mentioned, the actual background study has been shared with council, but the formal process is that we post that background study on the town's website for public viewing. And that is going to be done sometime before the end of this year, maybe as soon as this week or the following one after. Then there's a bit of time for staff and legal counsel to review the development charge bylaw and the policies that are contained within that bylaw. Following that, we will hold a public meeting with council where the public will be able to provide any input on the rates themselves and any policies within the DC bylaw. Following the public meeting, we will present the bylaw back to council for passage in Q1 of 2022. The kind of reason for the difference between when we publish a study and when it's passed is that by legislation, it has to be made public 60 days in advance of passage. So we are keeping to that 2 months timeframe with the proposed dates that we have currently. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. I will take down the slides, but if there are any questions on the slides, I'm happy to pull them back up. And I'm open to any questions or comments council may have.
Thank you very much, Natalia, for being brief and providing us with that terrific refresh. I'll turn to council to see if they have questions or comments. I'm not seeing any. I had one, Natalia. I'm the council rep along with Merpanko at the upper tier at Lanark County, and they have development charges. They're not on that list. Is it a different process for the county, or is it the same process? It's just a different, I guess they're their own entity and they've got their own development charges bylaws. Could you comment on the upper tier, or?
Yes, of course. Well, we can comment to the process. So the county does need to go through a very similar process to implement a DC charge. We did not include the upper tiers in that comparison. We can certainly do that for council and show it next time that we're in front of you so that you can see the combined charge of both the county and the local municipalities. Okay, thanks. But it couldn't, I don't need to see the comparison, but it's not on top of whatever we do. It's distinct, as I understand it. Yes, so it is distinct. Okay. However, it would be paid, both of the charges would be paid at the same time by a developer. So they would pay both for the local municipal development charge and for the Lanark County development charge. So it would be paid together, although separate. Thank you. I know Smith Falls is not part of the county, so it wouldn't be added on top, but for the other municipalities, it might be. Thank you. Back to my colleagues, anything, Councillor Dwyer, yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think for the record, several of us do have our little emoji hand up, but I'm not sure that you can tell.
I'm not, I don't have it. Thank you. I'm sorry, it's not on my screen.
Okay. So thank you for the presentation, Leah. I wondered if there's, if you could clarify for me, there is a copy of the DC background study that is already posted. It's on the website. You noted that there's another one, another background study that will be published. Will it come with additional detail to supplement what's already in the DC study? Or will it simply be a final version based on the direction that you get from council?
Thank you. Through the chair, the study that is published currently will not be changed unless there's some direction from council to go back and make some changes today. So no, the studies will be likely the same as what has already been published, unless we, again, get some direction today.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I have two questions. The first is, I noticed when I read the background study, particularly the appendices, that while 30% of the DCs being collected are going to be attributed to roads, there was next to no detail provided on the specific projects that would pertain to. And I was hopeful that council would be given those projects so that we could determine whether or not those levels of service are indeed something that we wanted to offer. I know that there's a note in the schedule that generally says it shall be in conformity with land use schedule B of the official plan, and then the transportation master plan, which is yet to be determined. So I noticed, as commentary, I noticed the same thing with the park schedule, that there were general parks improvements proposed, but there was no indication of what those would include, where it would be located, the specific itemized items that we would be collecting for. And my concern is that that's going to leave us vulnerable to a challenge or an appeal once we pass the bylaw, to be able to demonstrate what we are collecting those fees for. So is there sort of a discussion that has been going on behind the scenes that would provide that level of detail to substantiate the value of the DCs that we are equating at this point?
I don't know if CEO Morris or the consultants from Hempson want to tackle that.
Well, through the chair. Yeah, so thank you, Rebella here. I'm also on the line. So that's a very good question. We did look at, obviously, and speak with the directors, and particularly on the road side. We wanted to put in a provision recognizing that there are a series of projects identified in the official plan and road requirements that would be needed to facilitate development in those areas. But the specific quantum of the project itself and some of the natures around the specifics is yet to be ironed out, and will likely be ironed out with the completion of the transportation master plan. And the idea being that we wanted to put in some provision for that would capture a scope of work, which would be driven by growth, and obviously the direction in terms of what that work might exactly look like, would be kind of concluded for after the completion of that study. So there isn't I guess a specific, X amount of road kilometers or a specific laneway that we're looking at, but it would be kind of covering a catchment area of projects. And from when we talked to the director and staff, there was more projects that could facilitate a greater number, greater gross cost that we've included, but we only included a portion of it, recognizing that there's a lot more work to do with the TMP. And on the parks and recreation side, it was a little bit more narrow. There was only park improvements, which is kind of relative to some of the work that's been done historically. We did want to capture again some of those elements with that.
And I understand Councillor Dwyer's second part was, I'm not saying it's vague, but without more detail, does that leave us vulnerable to a challenge? I guess, so I don't know if you want to comment on that.
So through the chair, it's always difficult to determine that level. Obviously, our preference would be to have the, in a perfect world, the transportation master plan and all the stuff done in advance, and that would lay the exact groundwork and map of what work needs to be done. That being said, there have been other studies which we've done some provisionary work. The official plan is a council approved document that talks about the road work that needs to be, so there is some defensibility there for sure. But again, in an ideal world, there would be an exact project list that talks about all different specifics. But in this case, we're not working with that. We expect the DC study to be updated when that information becomes available.
Okay, thank you. Can people, I'll come back to Councillor Dwyer. Can people raise their, unless you just want to finish that point, do you?
Well, my sub question was related.
Okay, please go ahead then.
Thank you. So my second question was, there's a number of projects that have been included, but they seem to be projects that are limited within a 2 to 5 year range, with the exception of previous debt incurred through growth related projects from years gone by. Given the tenure that these documents are supposed to be long-term planning for, can you provide an explanation for why our project list is so limited to 2 to 5 years?
So through the chair, there are some projects over longer term. To your point, there is more debt that we've kind of put out over a longer period. Part of it is just not knowing a fulsome idea of some of the other projects that are going to be occurring at the back end of the planning period. And to further bolster the defensibility of the study, we really wanted to try and scope the works that are known and defendable and council's been aware of and staff have been planning for, which puts more of the emphasis on the immediate 5 year period, which is also from a DC perspective as well, the most important period, because that's the term of the bylaw, the 5 years. So certainly if there was more projects, that would just generally put additional pressure on rates to increase them beyond what we've already had. So there was an effort by staff to try and ensure that the list put together was defensible in the sense of trying to ensure that capturing projects that are actually known for and are required for development. But again, keeping in mind there's going to be studies on both the water, wastewater, and transportation side that might require additional work needed that will be updated in the next DC study.
Thank you, Andrew. I have Mayor Panko and then Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Natalia and Andrew. Obviously, this is it's new for us. It's very comprehensive and a very, I guess, tightly regulated process to follow to include the recommended DC amounts. A couple of questions. One, I guess, do you have a process you want to follow to determine what DC amount council wants to support? I guess we'd be looking tonight for direction as to do we support the recommendation or do we look at a lower amount? Secondly, at what point are the DC charges applied? So understanding this will come in sometime in Q1 next year. Is applied at the time of building permit application. Just a question there. Thirdly, I would like to see in final report the county or upper tier DCs that are applied, especially for those that are in our region. It gives us some context as to what the total amount would be for development in those areas. And final question, I'm not sure if it's suitable or not, but I chair the town's Housing Advisory Committee, and we are in the process of developing a affordable housing community improvement plan. And there's some questions from the committee as to the possibility of utilizing DCs to help fund an affordable housing CIP. And I don't know if that's a possible connection or if regulations prohibit that type of funding or that type of use of DCs.
So Andrew and Natalia, I'm assuming you kept track of those, and which one would like to respond to which? Please go ahead.
Well, I'll start off with the first question on the policy direction for tonight. So in terms of the rate that we've set, the background study, it looks at and calculates the maximum full rate under the Development Charges Act. Council has the authority, obviously, as Natalia indicated in her presentation, to implement a rate on either at that or lower than that, and the rates can be phased in. At this particular time, this is when the study gets released and put for public consultation. There is no requirement at that time for council to make a decision on what those rates might look like in terms of when they want to implement them. That would, my recommendation would be to hear what the public has to say and wait for the public meeting. At point, council can take the information from both the public information sessions and us, obviously the consultants, and make a decision during the deliberation bylaw in terms of what the policy rate would look like. So that's part of the first question. And then with that, I think that's important. Maybe I'll jump to number 3, and then Natalia can answer question number 2, just because I think it's related. In terms of the timing of the rate, when the bylaw gets implemented, the rates would, there's a couple different dates. There's the bylaw passage date, and you can put the development charge rates into effect at a date after bylaw passage. And then the rates would be payable at building permit. But because of the changes to the legislation, which happened on January 1st of 2020, that doesn't necessarily mean that every development would come after the date that you passed your bylaw or the rates are enforced, that they would pay that rate that's identified in your bylaw. There was a freezing of the rates that got passed in January 1st of 2020. So rates that or applications that are site plan or zoning bylaw amendment applications that have come in between that period, their rates would be technically frozen for a period of 2 years after council has approved those applications. So there might be some applications following that, which is a bit of an internal phase-in for some developments that are already midway through the pipeline that have their current rate, i.e. 0, payable at building permit, but new applications would be subject to. So that throws a little wrinkle in the timing of when things get paid, but that is a provincially mandated kind of phase in, and we have to oblige by that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Natalia, you're going to tackle the affordable housing one and the other one. I've got you coming up next, Councillor Brennan, after this. Okay.
Sure, yes. The third question was, could we add the county DCs into the comparison? And certainly we can do that. We'll add to any of the lower tiers that it applies to. And then the last question about affordable housing is a very interesting one. One of the key pieces of the legislation is that in order to levy a development charge going forward on a 10-year capital basis, there has to be a level of service already provided by the municipality. So we would need to establish an existing level of service. We could take this away and discuss with staff if this is an option, but certainly quite an interesting question.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brennan.
Sorry, actually, maybe before I even get into that, if I can just add to Natalia's comments, also just in terms of community improvement programs, if you do create CIPs, even though you would implement the development charges, you can have certain developments exempt through a CIP from the payment of DCs, which I know affordable housing is kind of one of the things where it does always gain interest, so you can exempt them from the payment of DCs. with the use of the CIP, which is done separate to the DC bond and more as a planning policy tool rather than done through the actual development charge bylaw, which is a little bit more stringent, and you can't make really any amendments to it without the formal process as we're doing right now. So sorry, not to hijack Natalia's response, but I thought I'd just add that.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Brennan, please.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for the presentation and the report, which I might add is 135 pages long. So there's a lot to digest there. I guess in terms of process with the presentation tonight, and usually with a presentation, it's not really up for debate for council. I'm not ready to debate to talk about the the do's or don'ts of DCs, but I do appreciate the information. In terms of the, and I'm glad you mentioned the public input, Andrew. What's the timing for that? And are we talking about how long before we get a public meeting going? And I need to digest what you sent us on, which I got on Friday.
So through the chair, it's a statutory public meeting is required under the Development Charges Act. We have to give 20 days notice of that meeting via newspaper publication. So once we've kind of all internally are satisfied with the background study help and council gives us the green light, we can formally make that study public, which would then, in my view, launch that public consultation period, which we would advertise for the public meeting. I would see that public meeting occurring sometime in the new year, probably towards the end of January or February, early February.
Yeah. And through the chair, in the meantime, I look forward. I think that this warrants a priority issue discussion with council after we've digested the report and everything else. So hopefully that's what's going to happen.
Okay, Councillor Alfred.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I don't know that we want to have any in-depth discussion till after the public meeting. I don't really have any questions. There is a great deal to digest, but I just because it is 135 pages long and we have many interested parties listening and watching this discussion, just maybe to recap some of the things that I read were that in our planned capital in the asset management, we're planning 17.35 million, but only 9.45 million of that 9.45 is not subject to DCs, and so the town would have to be funding that portion of it, whatever it is we end up doing, whether we have it. It's not even eligible, is what I'm saying. 9+ million, and on one of the pages it says that 6.468 million is DC eligible, and that would translate to 188,000 per annually for over the course of I believe it was 10 years. And currently we have no reserves on any of these lines. So it would seem to me, at least, that it makes the most sense to start putting some of that money away for the future and for the future growth. So those, again, no real questions, because I think actually, thank you, I found it quite understandable. And I now feel like I have a much better handle on development charges than I did certainly when Councillor Dwyer and I, who were first bringing this up. So I appreciate your report tonight, and I'll look forward to more discussion as we move through this process.
Thank you. Councillor McGuire, do you want to jump in on anything, or Councillor Allen? I just have to keep looking at you. So no, okay. So Councillor Dwyer, you wanted to make another comment or question?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I think my internet's unstable. Did you invite me to speak?
I did.
Thank you. Sorry. Just one of the key questions that the Hampson and Associates has asked us to discuss tonight is phasing in. And I think in addition to the legislative changes that were adopted earlier in the year to recognize the phasing and payment deferrals for large projects, I think that it's wise for council to consider similar grandfathering of DC payments for some of our larger projects in town, where this is a very new concept that has been uncontemplated in the performance for the development review. And in particular, the projects that come to mind are the Bellamy Farms subdivision, where we have registered phases of that development that are currently under construction, but because of the nature of the dwellings that are being constructed within it, they would not be eligible for DC deferrals as larger projects were. I think it's a different game to play when we have unregistered plans of subdivision, such as Wood Avenue, where none of those properties have been sold at this point. The developer is not mid-stage construction and then suddenly faced with a DC charge. So I think that there's merit in having a discussion about adding additional eligibility for grandfathered status to the implementation of that. I would still like to see, and perhaps this can be done as part of the public consultation session, but I really would like to see a little bit more detail on how we got to naming the projects that we did included in the schedule. Generally, I'm a little disappointed that there wasn't more forethought put into growth related projects, and the majority of the projects that we are now collecting for are retroactive collections for projects that have already taken place, and now we are just looking at debt payment. In an effort to actually reduce the DCs, not that I'm one for always reducing DCs, but as an effort to reduce the DCs, I'd actually be in favor of taking the debt payments out of the schedule to reduce that cost, or alternatively find projects that are a little bit more proactive and attributed to new development that's coming to town. But I do look forward to the public consultation process, and I'm hoping that we can maybe have a more fulfilled discussion at Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Councillor Dwyer. We will definitely have a more fulsome discussion as that bylaw comes forward. So I'm turning to my colleagues. There were a couple of asks tonight. It is posted, but we will repost or rebrand it and let the public know that it's being posted. If you agree, we'll set that date after this. Staff will set a date for a public meeting, and we've heard that will be, in the new year. And then if we go that far, if we agree, and I hope you do, then at that point afterwards, we'd have that fulsome discussion that you've all asked for. We would be probably reviewing a bylaw, and that would trigger that conversation. But we've had the public input and et cetera. So is everyone agreement, is there consensus to go ahead and post this and to set the date for the public meeting? And then after that, we would have that fulsome discussion again. I'm seeing nodding. Councillor Brennan, please go ahead.
I was just wondering if we can't have a discussion prior to posting amongst ourselves as in a Committee of the Whole meeting in the near future. Just to do due diligence.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Of course we can. I'll turn to my colleagues. One thought was, at least somebody mentioned tonight, they would like to have the public input before they had that fulsome discussion, but there's, it's the will of council to either wait till after the public meeting, or Councillor Brennan suggesting.
No, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I think that through the chair, I think that to hear from the public is utmost importance. And then subsequent to that, have a discussion amongst ourselves.
Okay.
And where we're going to go, which is fine. Yeah.
Okay. Deputy Clerk Bennett, you've got the direction that and documented that down, that we've reached a consensus on this. So I'd like to thank our friend from Hempson. Did you have any last comments, Natalia or Andrew or C.O. Morris on this?
No. None from me, Mr. Chair. That was the direction we were seeking. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Moving right along. We don't have any adoption of the minutes. We do have some director's reports. C.O. Morris, I think it's Director Manhire, but I don't know if you have others as well.
Just one, two items, I think, from Director Manhire.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two quick items. The Festival of Lights is in full swing in terms of getting organized. We currently have 17 sponsors. We are collecting money from those sponsors, and that money will be donated to Smiths Falls Food Security through this event. We're also putting up trees along with this that companies will sponsor, and those trees are going to be distributed to families that are in need through the Lanark County Housing and Services. It's just so the public is aware, it's at Centennial Park, just down Confederation Drive. You can walk through or drive through, and it begins November 29th and will go into January. The trees will be up from November 9th to December 19th, at which point they will be donated to families that are in need for that service. So the other piece is that is the good news that we finally got approval and guidance around protocols for the canteen at the community center to be open. We have reached out to the Bears, which had the contract for it, and they are currently going through with public health to determine how those protocols should be delivered, as well as lining up staffing for it. And we wait for them to kind of let us know when they'll be able to open. The premise is that they will open during our heavy use periods in the facility, as well as for Ritos games, Bears games, and tournaments for the facility.
That'll be terrific. Any questions for Director Manhire? Councillor Dwyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's related to community services and things to come near the Christmas season. I understand that we are going to have a Santa Claus parade in town, which is super exciting. And I acknowledge that that is not something that is hosted or organized by the town. But Mr. Manhire, can you confirm, because typically this is something that council gets directly involved in, can you confirm whether or not the town will have a float, whether or not council need to be prepared to be present, or if we can party on the sidelines in our family bubbles?
It's an excellent question, Mr. Chair. There will be opportunities for council and the rest of the community to get involved in that process. We're currently lining up the floats, and the councillor is quite correct that we are not the ones organizing it, but we are in touch with those because it will start from the community center off of Lansdowne and move down to the mall. And it goes on December 11th. So the elves are furiously putting things together, and we will put out a notice and invitations as quickly as we can get when the opportunities are.
Great, thank you. Great question. Thank you, Director Manhire. We have no correspondence, and we have no in-camera items, and our first priority issue is 8.1. With Director McMahon, it's a review of the ATV bylaw report. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and other members of council. The report I have this evening with respect to the ATV bylaws is to advise council that the two current bylaws that are in place, one with respect to the permission for ATVs to use our municipal highways within towns or our road networks. And then the other one is with respect to the use of some of our municipal lands within town, one of them being a portion of the Cataract Trail and the other being our municipal compost site located on Highway 43 West. So it's important to note that these two bylaws that are presented in this report do come to seize at the end of November, November 30th to be precise. And staff have been in consultation with Rick Gilfillan from our, who's our president of the local chapter, I guess you can call it, the Rideau Lakes ATV Club. In an appendix to the report, Rick notes that local ATV club and as well as the Ontario Federation of All-Terrain Vehicles would wish to have a provision within an amending bylaw if council feels that they wish to make these two bylaws permanent. What they're looking for is an amendment to the use of our roads within town to have a home to trail and then trail to home provision written into the bylaw. And what that would mean is basically just that. And one of the challenges that we're hearing from the Rideau Lakes ATV Club is that it's somewhat challenging for them to access the trail network without having to either load their ATVs in the back of the truck and or trailer and get them to the trailheads to be able to access the trails. Rick has had correspondence and questions coming from the local community that do use the trails, that have ATVs, that, that kind of one of the overwhelming questions that he expressed was, it's all great, but how do I get there from my home? How do I get back again? So that is, I guess, one of the major challenges that they have had, although they're very thankful and grateful for the two bylaws that are currently in place. So if council were to support an amendment to the existing bylaws, so one amendment would basically make the provision for the use of the roads within town permanent, as well as the use of a couple of properties that were previously noted within town on the trail network itself. And lastly, an amending bylaw to authorize a home to trail access through town limits. It's also important to note that they're not looking for use of arterial roads within our roads network within town. It would be simply local and collector roadways to be able to go from home to trail or from trail to home. So with that, through the chair, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director McMahon, and Councillor McGuire is going to kick us off tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director McMahon. I'm very supportive of this, and I think it's been a great trial. I think having the home to trail provision is going to be no more disruptive than if somebody's cutting the grass with a lawnmower. So excited to see this really great tourism initiative go through. One piece of the puzzle I think we need to address before we can pass it, though, is the safety of the bridge crossing. The gap between where the rail tie ends and where the bridge wall begins is big enough that an adult could fall down. If that was a workplace hazard, it's over 9 feet, so it'd be a fatal fall, and you'd have to have fall protection. And there's no guardrails or anything to seal that up. Now, this has been brought up multiple times as this comes forward, but I think there's been an issue with concerning who owns the bridge, who's actually responsible for it. And as much as I acknowledge it's not a municipal thing that the town's going to go out and fix, I think we need to put the onus on the Rideau Lakes ATV Club to get the problem solved before we put it through, especially now that the season's ending. They've got a few months to figure it out, but I really think it's important we get this solved before we give this final approval and it goes on the back burner.
Good point to Councillor McGuire. So supportive with a condition that gap and hazard is addressed before we implement it. Okay, thank you. Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very happy that the pilot was so successful, but I do have a question with regard to putting ATVs on any of our roads. Do we know, Mr. McMahon, how many members there are of the Rideau Lakes ATV Club? And I'm assuming it's not going to just be the Rideau Lakes ATV Club. It's going to be any ATV will be allowed to go on our side street.
Who are licensed, and there's provision. Her license, they carry insurance, and they belong to a club. Yeah.
I understand that.
Sorry, Director McMahon.
Yeah, well, what Peter said.
We don't have any idea of even the numbers that in Rideau Lakes. of how many ATVs would be traveling our streets?
I don't.
Well, certainly the trial would say that they've been very responsible and very respectful. So I don't have a lot of reservation, but I would support the condition that Councillor McGuire has mentioned in the past, that be taken care of before we proceed with any further.
Yeah, and I think if I could, through the chair, I think the main things, and it kind of prefaced earlier by the chair, that all the provisions as per Ontario Regulation 316.03 would still apply. I guess one of the main ones, if there was any reservations with respect to driving through, local roads and collector roads and ways within town, is that the maximum speed provision for 50-kilometer-hour posted roadways, 20 kilometers an hour for ATVs. So that is fairly, in my opinion, unobtrusive. They be traveling much slower than the average speed of traffic. So I just wanted to point that out. So all those same provisions noted in the report still apply.
Great, thank you. I've got Mayor Panko, Councillor Dwyer, and then Councillor Allen. Please go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you, Director McMahon. I think we've got plenty of evidence that some of the fears that were maybe escalated or addressed a couple of years ago did not come to fruition, and the ATVers have been very respectful of the laws and the rules and their neighbors. So I support the recommendation, including the sort of the home to trail option for ATVs, and as well, obviously, with new speeds that you indicated. And as for making it permanent, I assume if I have no reservations making it permanent, and down the road became an issue that we don't expect today, I guess, future council could always revoke the bylaw if it became too problematic, I would assume.
Mayor Panko, did you have any comment on Councillor McGuire's suggestion that
Agreed.
Okay, you agreed. Okay, thank you. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, hold on. Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate where Councillor McGuire is coming from, respecting needs for improvements to the bridge. But I think that it's burdensome to put that on the ATV club. I think the reason, that we have not been able to resolve that issue ourselves as a municipality is that it is a legal quandary. And I think to hinge their approval, of making this arrangement permanent is unfair. I don't disagree that it's problematic and a liability. Anytime I go up there with my kids, I'm fearful that somebody's going to fall through the cracks. So I don't disagree that it needs to be resolved. But as Councillor McGuire said, this is not the first time we've talked about this. And I believe at the last discussion, we had directed staff to get a title search, so we at least knew who owned the structure. And I don't believe that ever came back to council for an update. So perhaps the CAO Morris can provide an update now, or alternatively, we can add it to as a priority item with a recommendation on how to solve this at the next meeting as committee of the whole.
CAO Morris, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not aware of the outcome of such an investigation, but I'll find out, and we'll bring that back to committee with the ownership. I'm not aware of who owns it.
Okay. So there, Councillor Allen.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Director McMahon, for your report. I sit on the CAP Trail as a member of that organization, and I do believe we're the only part of the CAP Trail that allows these vehicles. And so for me, I've been kind of watching it and chatting with people and seeing people, the reaction of them in our community. And like my colleagues, I I haven't had any feedback negative about how they handle themselves. I do see the significance of having them in our community too during the time when they're coming as groups, because it's good for our restaurants and our downtown people that are doing different things. I do like the idea that Councillor Dwyer said, though, about looking into how we can make that safer. The last thing we want is to have some accident happen because we weren't aware of how safe it was. But no, I'm in support of this, and I like very much the demands that they put on people who use them. You know, the age was a big factor. People have asked me about that, and having a valid Ontario driver's license, those kinds of things. The fact that they lay that out, I think, is really important as well. No, I'm happy to support this.
Okay, Councillor Brennan, do you have anything to add, or you're fine?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with it. And I understand the concerns from, expressed about the safety. I don't think it's a deal breaker. I think we should, we can go ahead with this and then deal with that issue. It's not really ours, but doing due diligence, I think, is important. So, as someone that frequents around the cat trail, and I haven't really seen a lot of ATVs over the summer months, and ever. I've seen them occasionally, and it's nice to see them. And I think the home to trail provision is a good idea. And I think that with the requirements in terms of speed and all the rest of it, I think it's a very safe thing to do. And people that have these things, if you're in town, then you can actually access the trail, from home. So I agree with it. I'm happy to support it.
Okay, thank you. So we have consent. So Councillor Alford, you wanted to jump back in there?
No, you might be recapping, because I think.
I am.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have consensus on the two bylaws where we still, it's not clear. Most of council, we're in support of Councillor McGuire's suggestion that hazard be addressed before we open it up to the ATVs in the spring. And Councillor Dwyer suggested that it shouldn't be their responsibility until we know. So that's where but that was a single opinion. And then Mayor Pengo, did you want to jump in just on this particular piece of, okay, please go ahead.
Sure. No, I'm comfortable moving ahead, considering the current agreement is expiring at the end of the month, I believe. I'm comfortable moving ahead, but with staff direction to work with the ATV club and the landowner to find a solution to the safety concern raised by Councillor McGuire. I don't want to hold it up. That may take, who knows how long, months or longer, especially with the title issues.
Okay. Councillor McGuire, last word to you.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to hold my position on this. I think the prudent thing would be to defer the bylaw at council. I'm okay approving it at committee of the whole right now and waiting till the work's done, but this is really our last lever to get this problem solved. And I think the town needs to work with the ATV club, but ultimately, when you look at a lot of these trail networks, the clubs, whether it's the snowmobile clubs or the ATV clubs, take on responsibility for fixing bridges, for maintaining these surfaces all the time. So I think ultimately it's in their best interest. I believe that we've had it end at the end of the month because that's when the season ends. So if we delay this by a couple months and get this problem fixed, it shouldn't affect the startup in the spring. But I respect the consensus, and yeah, glad it's happening overall.
So the consensus, until you just spoke, was that we are going to bring those two bylaws forward tonight. And Mayor Pankow suggested that direction be given to staff to sort out that hazard and get that solved, but not link it to as a condition of approval of the two bylaws. So, but Councillor McGuire, you said you couldn't support that, or you're comfortable with, no, you're not going to support. That's fine. Well, we'll bring the two bylaws forward tonight because we have consensus for that. And there was consensus to ask staff to sort out the ownership and to work with the ATV clubs around repairing that hazard. So this will come on tonight, the council meeting, which will follow this. Thank you, Director McMunn. Excuse me, and you don't go far. 8.2 is the award of the RFP, the environmental assessment on the Confederation Bridge. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so happy to report that the Public Works Department did issue a request for proposal this fall, and we closed on that request for proposal on November 12th. We did have a total of six proposals submitted in response to the RFP. We had proposals submitted from McIntosh Perry, Parsons, Jacobs Engineering Group, BT Engineering, WSP Canada, and RV Anderson Associates. So what the RFP will do for the town is, and it is with respect to municipal class EA for the Confederation Bridge, or the Confederation Drive River Crossing, as commonly known in town. So this municipal class EA will inform a number of different options for the replacement of the bridge, whether it's replaced with a vehicular bridge or a pedestrian bridge, or perhaps some type of a hybrid, if you will, through public consultation as to what the town will end up with. But what we do know right now currently is the existing river crossing is closed as a result of a structural assessment that was previously performed. So all that to say that the municipal class EA will be public consultation, the public will be engaged. That'll assist assist this council in determining through this municipal class EA process what the best outcome is for that river crossing. So all that to say, this evening we're looking at, our staff are recommending the award to McIntosh Perry. We did an internal review within the department. Myself looked at the proposals and scored them based on the rating system in the report, as well as Vanessa Bernicki, who's our engineering technologist, and our new staff addition, Matthew Linton, who's our asset and capital project management coordinator. So the three of us independently reviewed each of the submissions and scored them as noted in page 2 of the report. And so one of the things that we're looking for is the level of effort proposed by each of the consultants. And in this particular case, McIntosh Perry scored at 777 hours, which was slightly above the average of 685 when we take the average level of effort amongst the 6 different respondents. And they had a total score of 91.33 out of 100. The average score was 78.61. That all being said, they were marginally higher than about 3 of the lower submitted proposals, albeit their level of effort was significantly lower. So I know we're marginally over budget at 75,000. It was what was budgeted in the capital, the 2021 capital budget. Albeit talking with our treasurer, the difference could be funded through our tax supported capital reserves. So an $11,000 over expenditure based on the 2021 approved budget for this project. So with that, the recommendation is to award McIntosh Perry. Staff feel as if they're a reputable company. They're all reputable for that matter, but we feel they're getting the best value through McIntosh Perry to inform a decision on this structure.
Thank you, Director McMunn. I know, and I just want to remind my colleagues and members of the public, we're not here to talk about what that bridge purpose is going to be. No matter what that outcome of that discussion, we need to do this environmental assessment. That's the next step. We can't do anything until this is done. So this is about awarding the contract. So I'll turn it over to my colleagues for questions or comments. Councillor Brennan, why don't you start us off?
Thank you. Hallelujah. The bridge has been closed for, I'm going to say 6 years, and it is a bridge. And so, yeah, I support staff's recommendation. I do note, though, and we'll be talking about this later, that it doesn't appear to me that this bridge will be replaced before this term of council. I know we have somewhere in the neighborhood of $21 million in capital, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like the bridge is going to be replaced before this term of council, which I'm very disappointed about. But I support staff's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I just to add to what Councillor Brennan said, I ran for council 11 years ago, I guess. It was Mayor Panko and Councillor Brennan and I. And one of the things I cared about most, in fact, still do, is the Confederation Bridge being repaired and used. And the sad reality is we have brought this forward, in my recollection and my notes all over the floor, 4 times. We've paid environmental assessment and experts to give us advice on what to do and how to move forward. And then we had even amounts of money that we could spend to repair it and then deferred it. So here we are, like 11 years later, with that poor bridge now. We're being told that it's just too far gone to, even have that as one of the options. Very sad. So yes, I'm going to support this, but I wish all of the money that we had spent on all of these reports, we would have spent on the bridge. Maybe we would have an active bridge right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I definitely support staff's recommendation, as it's highly unlikely that we were to get any funding from other levels of government for this particular bridge or crossing, whatever you want to call it. We need all the information we can get to make the best decision. And so I'll wait until we hear back from McIntosh Perry, and then we'll have the debate on what type of crossing bridge we can swing. Thank you.
Councillor McGuire.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Director McMahon. This is really exciting because we've been talking about it for so long. It's in our strategic plan. I'm wondering, timeline-wise, what can we expect? When can we expect a recommendation? When can we expect public consultation? And when do we expect this to go to the design phase or to have something selected?
Yeah, so through the chair, so there'll be a public information center hosted over the course of the winter months. There is a provision in the RFP document that we advertised that that there be initial preliminary design completed and the municipal class EA in itself be completed by, I believe it's towards the middle to the end of June of 2022. That being said, I believe that will dovetail well into Councillor Brennan's concern. I mean, in so much that this particular term of council will have an opportunity to, I guess, review that municipal class EA to determine what they feel, taking into account public consultation, public feedback, what that bridge is going to turn out to be at the end of the day. So, albeit it won't be constructed within this term of council, but this council will be able to make the decision on the outcome of what it's going to be at the end of the day. If that makes this group feel any better. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Dwyer, you're okay? Okay, good. I just would add that to take a decommissioned bridge and put it back and give it a new life, I'm not surprised 5 to 7 years would go by. The first environmental assessment was a lower grade assessment, informed us, moved the project forward. At the same time, we were going through a very large construction and boom in our town, competing priorities. This council agreed in our plan not to build a bridge, but to come to a decision. And I believe we will get to that with this next stage done soon. So there's looks like full support on those to move ahead with the award of this RFP, and I believe that will come forward tonight as well. So thank you. Now we're moving on to the 8.3 with Director Costello is going to talk about our continuation of e-participation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As council will recall, in late summer, we brought forward a report regarding the continuance of virtual meetings. At that time, council concurred to stay within the virtual format that we've been in for quite some time now until late November. It doesn't seem like that long ago that was presented, but here we are in late November, bringing forward a report to you this evening with a recommendation that we maintain the virtual format, not just for the next couple of months, but until we can see the renovations complete here in the complex. When renovations are ongoing, we will lose our council chambers. And at this point, certainly Director Manhire may have more information than I, but we don't have full use of the upstairs hall due to the vaccination clinic. And we don't foresee putting any money into the current council chambers to retrofit it due to COVID protocols. So at this time, it's being recommended that we stay with the virtual format. We are still within our state of emergency. However, with the recommendation, we're also advising council that we amend the current procedural bylaw to allow e-participation if the state of emergency is lifted.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGuire and then Councillor Alford.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Director Costello. I generally support the report tonight. I have 3 recommendations that I'd like to see added to it. The first would be that we just start posting on YouTube instead of posting on Facebook, Twitch, and all these other places. I think it creates unnecessary work for staff, and essentially we can share the YouTube link on Facebook, but YouTube's really where these videos should be going. It's more accessible than Facebook. I'd like to see the videos labeled with the date and the name of the committee meeting, so it's not just Smith Falls Live. It's really hard to find the past videos on there, and especially if they were labeled in a year, month, day, number format, then if they're alphabetical, they're going to be chronological. And the last thing is, I'm thinking of the Accessibility Committee, CIP, and MHC when I say this, but the online meeting format's been very difficult for a lot of our volunteers, and I would really like to see us give the committees the choice of how they meet. I think for a committee of 5 people, it's easy to have enough space for them and enough space for the public. So once the vaccination clinic wraps up, the upstairs at the hall, the upstairs of the Memorial Center would be a great spot. And I'm sure we've got for those 5 to 10 person meeting groups, if that's how they could most effectively meet. I know we've had a hard time getting quorum for the Accessibility Committee a few times, and I think if we were in person, it might make it easier. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to clarify. I understand you're supporting the continuation of what the status quo with some caveats. I would turn to staff and ask if the posting to YouTube is fairly straightforward, and the naming and dating of these meetings, so it makes it easier for the public to find. Are those reasonable, and or would you like to go away, Director Costello, and come back with your thoughts on that?
No, both of those, the first 2 requests that Councillor McGuire brought forward are 100% feasible. We have switched to a third party to do our live streaming. So that's simply, I think, just a direction to give them to date and title the videos. We have dropped using Twitch as one of our feeds, but we do currently still use YouTube and Facebook. I know the Facebook is active. A lot of people do watch the live stream on Facebook. I did try to get some stats for you regarding viewership for this meeting, but was unable to. But I can certainly give council some statistics if they'd like to review those for viewership before directions given to drop one of our live streams in social media.
Okay, and so then if staff can do it, those 2 pieces, I'm leaving out the whether committees meet in person deliberately. Would the rest of council support? I guess if it's on Facebook and people are using it, why drop it? It doesn't cost anything. But Councillor McGuire, you brought it up. Why don't you jump in again?
Yeah, I'm just saying we should share the YouTube link on Facebook. So instead of streaming live on two platforms, but two platforms that can go wrong, we put it up on YouTube, and we share the link on Facebook, and people can watch on Facebook to YouTube.
Okay, and staff, Director Costello said that that's doable, and the documentation, better identification of the meetings by date and title is also quite doable. There's support from council just for those, and then, okay, now Councillor Allen, then Councillor Alford, then Councillor Brennan.
You know, sorry.
I just want to leave that discussion about committee meeting face to face for right now, and we're going to come back to that. That's a little different.
Oh, that's what I was going to talk about, so that's fine. I'll wait.
Okay, but you support the continue to meet this way?
I know that. I had
okay.
my thumb up. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Alford.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do support continuing. It doesn't seem to make any sense to do anything different at this point, for council at least. And I support the two issues that Councillor McGuire gave up, and I'd like to add one, in that eScribe has the potential to using the minutes to put the link to where it appears in the video. If I've explained that appropriately, just if people are watching the discussion and they can click on that minute marker or however it's designated, so that people can go and watch just that in case they don't want to watch the rest of the hot air that we sometimes do during a meeting, and they're only interested in one particular issue. But yes, I'm supportive of the of staff's recommendation.
So I'm hearing that and I'm going to keep going with this, but I'm hearing they're going to take a good process and make it better by adding these little features. And Director Costello, you could think about whether that Councillor Alford's latest addition is something we can implement relatively quickly. In the meantime, Councillor Brennan's next, followed by Mayor Panko.
Well, I think we've got everything's okay with meeting the way we're meeting now, and I'm not really that technical, but Councillor McGuire, you know, whatever makes it more accessible to people or an easier, I'm all for it. The eScribe, we've purchased that. Am I correct? And that's the feature that's really slick, because you just click on the agenda item and then you can watch the discussion. Mm-hmm. So if we can do that in the meantime before, you know, the chambers are finished, that would be really, really good. So am I free to speak about the committees?
In 1 minute, please. Mayor Panko's just going to comment on this first piece, and
okay.
we're going to open that.
And then I'll comment on that. Yep, thanks.
And I'll come right back to you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mayor Panko.
No, I agree. Whatever methods we can follow to make things more accessible and easier to use for our community, the better. So I'm supportive of that. I'm also supportive of continuing with e-participation, and I'll let you proceed with comments on the committee work. I'll comment on that once you get back to me.
Okay, I'm going to go in reverse order, if I may. So the question now that we have agreement on everything so far, and staff have said that it's doable in the very near future, we could put those features on. So Councillor McGuire suggested that the committees of council have the option of meeting in person or by electronic meeting device. So I'm going to go in reverse order. So Mayor Panko, do you have a thought on that?
I have no objection to providing committees with a choice. I think I'm in support of that, but I think in my experience, committees that I work on or chair, I think the e-participation method has been extremely accommodating, and we may have someone who is out of town who can participate, or just people can participate from the comfort of their own home, or they can step away from their workplace and participate without actually having to be physically in place. So obviously, I think it's working well. I'm not aware of any committees I work with that are seeking return to in-person, but if there's a method of doing it safely and that's the desire of the actual committee or task force, then I'm willing to be flexible for that. Thank you. Councillor Brennan, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that that I understand Councilor McGuire's point. However, I've been able to check in on committees that I would never check in on before, i.e. the Mayor's Task Force on Racism, or the Housing Committee, or Municipal Heritage Committee, CIP, and it comes up on the calendar. You know, that if you go to the website, oh, there's a CIP meeting on today, I can check it out. So that, you know, that is just super duper transparency. I know Councillor Alford and I are on the Planning Advisory Board, and you know, sometimes there's, you know, there might be 70 people watching. So it really is a fantastic way for the community to be in tune with their local government. So I would hope that we could keep that at least until we get the chambers done, and then we could have both. I mean, the perfect world would be we'd meet in person, and then we have the ability to stream it. So if anybody doesn't want to trudge down to the town hall, they can watch it. So that would be my preference. Yeah.
Thank you. Then we're going to, it'll go in this order if you'll allow me. Councillor Allen, Councillor Alford. If Councillor Dwyer wishes to jump in, that would be her chance. And I'm going to finish up with Councillor McGuire last.
You know, I agree with what Councillor Brennan just said in terms of that us being available for people to watch. And I know I've heard people say they've watched different committees that I sit on boards. I also, though, know that many of my committees and boards are made up of seniors, and some of them don't have access to be able to get on or going. They're borrowing a computer, or they're just missing meetings. The Railway Museum of Eastern Ontario, we now meet outside where we're socially distanced easily, and we can hear one another, because that's the other part with masks. A lot of times people can't hear one another, and it makes it problematic. So I would hope that we would allow committees to safely do whichever the committee is going to be able to have all of their members best served by. That would be my thought. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alford.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm leaning much like Councillor Brennan with this until we can get back into some where it's normal to meet in person, but have that streaming capability, which we will be able to do once town hall's done. The other question or concern I have is with regard to our committees meeting in person is our new vaccination policy and how that plays into committee meetings in person, and who will be responsible for ensuring everybody there is meeting the vaccination policy. So again, another little bit of a wrinkle, but I think again, there are some people who struggle with the technology, and there is assistance in that way. I know Town Hall would and has helped with some of that for some people if they need it. But I think we should fairly well stay the course, although I don't mind giving them the choice, but there is a couple of issues that I think we should, or concerns that we should make sure we have covered before we allow it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, the convenience is, like, I've been able to do meetings from Carleton Place when I'm at work. It's great. And I'm more advocating from members of these committees that have asked me to on their behalf. One question though, with Councillor Alford's comment, my understanding is that everybody, no matter where we're meeting, volunteers were part of that vaccine policy. So any volunteer not vaccinated is getting ejected anyway. Is that true, or is that being checked?
Director Costello, do you want to comment on that?
Certainly, if the committee members are meeting in person at this point, if they'd be meeting within the building, which under the OREG would require them to provide a certificate.
But my understanding is the vaccine policy said that volunteers were the same as staff, council, and contractors. So are they not being verified as part of that policy?
In my reading, if they were to stick with the Zoom format, they weren't entering the building, and they could be accommodated by doing it through a virtual meeting. It's not something that they would have to provide. Once you fall into the meeting category under the OREG and providing meeting space, then they would have to provide a certificate.
Okay, Councillor Alford.
Well, that just brings up another question then. Councillor Allen says they're meeting, offsite, like not in a one of our meeting spaces, the town's meeting spaces. How does that play out for those committee members?
We have all been double vaccinated, and we wear a badge on us that say double vaccinated.
CEO Morris.
Yeah, I think the fundamental difference is the Railway Museum is not a committee of council. We have a council appointment. So they would follow their own rules of engagement around vaccination.
That's what I thought. Okay, Councillor Brennan, you stuck your hand up. Was that?
No, that was my point.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So yes, Director Costello, please.
Sorry, I just went, if councils, I just wanted to comment on the boards and committees meeting in person. I just want to remind council that if once we're into renovations, none of the rooms upstairs will be available for any boards or committees to use. I don't think there's a meeting space large enough that would be able to accommodate boards and committees as well as members of the public. At this point, I can't say 100% if it's going to be operationally feasible to be able to live stream meetings that aren't being held either 100% virtually or if they're being held off-site. So that's a bit of a wild card right now. So that's not something we can't offer space at this point once we start renovations.
I had 3 council members, and I'm going to throw my hat into that pool of just leaving the committees the way we're doing it for now. And but the other recommendations that Councillor McGuire brought up were all supported by council. So the consensus is that we can revisit it in your next report, Director Costello. I would like to know what impact it is. If the committee's work is being impacted negatively by this, I would like to know that. And I think all of council would. If they're not able to reach quorum, if they aren't able to use the technology, I think we would have liked to have heard that before now, but Councillor McGuire's got some experience with that. And I'd like to know if the committee's, maybe a quick poll just to say, is everybody, how's it going? And in your next report, if you could come back with that information, that would be helpful. Are we okay to move on then? Thank you, Director Costello. I do want to let the public know that we're about to go into a discussion on the budget, which is going to probably last a little bit longer than we expect. And Mayor Panko and CEO Morris have a very important pre-scheduled meeting, and at around 7 or shortly before, they're going to have to depart. So when you see them leave in the middle of our budget discussion, it is certainly not from lack of interest. There will be much more to discuss with the budget, but they do have to leave. Will you come back? I don't think so after, if we're still going. May, if it goes short. So again, they certainly, as the chair, you'll just see them disappear. And again, it doesn't reflect their commitment to the topic or to their work tonight. Very unusual. I don't think it's happened in the 3.5 years. So good luck wherever you're off to. So now we're moving on to Treasurer Kozil is going to walk us through the first draft budget. And we're delighted to have you, Janet, with us again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just bear with me while I bring up my PowerPoint. Pardon me. So as indicated, there are going to be a couple of leaving. So I'll try to go through this PowerPoint as quickly as I can and just touch upon some of the highlights. So as indicated, I'm here to present the 2022 preliminary budget and to obtain a direction from council for our second draft, which will be held on December 13th.
Janet, I'm sorry, but we're getting quite a bit of feedback for some reason.
I'll turn off my video maybe.
Try that, please.
Okay, so please let me know. Is that better?
That's better, thank you.
Perfect, perfect. Excuse me. The annual budget represents one of the most important planning documents municipal council will produce. This preliminary budget, which is based on estimates, has been prepared and reflects the vision within our current strategic plan, as well as our asset management plan. As council will recall, in October, council provided guidance to staff to bring forward various scenarios for potential rate increases, such as status quo increase from 2021, which was 1.1, projected increases as per the long-term financial plans, tax rate increase of 3.38, water rate increase 5.5, and wastewater rate 3.5, as well as the current CPI for 2021, which is 3.8. And just further to that, just to let you know, in September, September alone, the CPI was 5.3. October's hasn't been posted yet. I just checked before the council started. And now my PowerPoint doesn't seem to be wanting to go. Oh, there we go. Sorry. So the net operational budget on this draft is 18.6 million. So just to let council know, that is an increase of 652,000 approximately from 2021, or a 3.6 rate or increase. The majority of that is labor increases, and some of it associated with growth. So as indicated, there were proposals brought forward for council's consideration this evening. The various scenarios. Increased taxation revenue ranging from 167,000 to 576,000. Increased water revenue ranging from 28,000 to 98. Wastewater ranging from 29,000 to 101. Proposals in this first draft, the community grant donation envelope is based on approximately 1% of the taxation revenue of 150,000 and hospital donation of 174,000. As presented in Schedule 3, the proposed capital budgets, tax supported is 9.9 million, water supported 9.4, wastewater supported 1.7. So further to this, the tax supported, as you know, is at a shortfall of approximately 2.8 million. And within the tax supported, there's already pre-approval of approximately 4.8 million in projects, which is approximately 1 million transferred from our capital reserve. On Schedule 5, 6, and 7, there is an impact to these proposed rate increases to the average residential water and wastewater billing, as well as the average 2022 tax billing. Some of the variables unconfirmed: 2022 tax assessment has been frozen, as well as for 2022, as well as 2023, we were just notified of. And there's approximately 1.9 in assessment growth from new builds of approximately 338,000. We expect the tax roll the first week of December. So hopefully we'll have that captured in the second draft. As noted, overall envelope 150,000 for community donations, hospital donation 174. The OSIF formula base that we had just received notification of that was going to go ahead in 2022. There's a placeholder of the same from 2021. The envelope had been double, but haven't gotten verification that indeed our allocation will double with that envelope. The one thing that is not included in here, there was a request for approximately 2% of taxation revenue for affordable housing task force. And that was with council's direction that was to be discussed this evening. I wanted to include the tax and water and wastewater comparators because we did not update them last year. As you will note, Smiths Falls is 6 out of 10. That is status quo from the last update 2 years ago. The water did change slightly. We were 5th in residential. We're now in 4th. However, that being said, the commercial, we were 7th in the last one, and we're now 8th in the commercial, and status quo for industrial rates. Some of the highlights in the capital budget: the Beckwith Street reconstruction, which has been pre-approved, the new water tower that will proceed if we do get successful with the grant application, the town hall renovations, the town square, Wood Avenue storm sewers project, which was pre-approved, and various studies. And as noted, the total for this particular draft is approximately 21 million, with a shortfall of 2.8 for the tax supported. So in my report, I have outlined several action items and staff will require direction on. As noted, current shortfall in the capital budget will require direction to offset this with either deferrals, additional capital financing, decreases to operational spending, potential tax rate increase, proposed tax rate increases aside from the growth, and proposed water and wastewater rate increases, the direction on the affordable housing request, again, the community donations and hospital donation. And as noted, our next draft will be presented on December 13th. So with that, I will pause and share any questions or answer any questions you may have before we proceed with action items.
Councillor McKenna, your microphone is muted.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Mayor Panko, because he has to leave, if he wanted to either make the case, as he brought up the 2% housing task force request, or if he wants to comment on any aspect of the budget, and then you can. So if you've got your thoughts ready, Mayor Panko.
I guess a few things, regarding a commitment towards funding the affordable housing CIP. So we've committed to the development of that program, but like our downtown CIP, which I think was initially approved probably in 2013, it doesn't truly exist until it's funded. And so I would look to the committee to be willing to provide some degree of support for affordable housing CIP, and since that is expected to be in place probably by mid-year, I think it'd be understandable that a smaller allocation for 2022 would be appropriate, as we may not have a full year, obviously, to leverage that. So I would like to see something there. As mentioned, the Housing Advisory Committee had asked for 2%. Perhaps if there is mid-year, up to 1% allotment would enable a good start for the affordable housing CIP, and of course understanding that through that program, which is yet to be developing and confirmed, there are elements to it which may or may not have a direct cost. So as an example, a tax abatement for affordable housing may not have an impact on our expenses, may not be an expense, but it will have an impact on future revenue from future development. So we may not need money for that. But if we, secondary suites is a very important section that we are working at, our staff are working at developing that bylaw and that program. Well, if we want to encourage secondary suites, do we, like other municipalities, have a financial incentive to do so? So there's a number of moving pieces here that are hard to forecast at this stage, especially considering it won't be in place until mid-year. But I'd like to see something, and I'll throw out the suggestion of which works out about 1% of tax revenue. Aside from that, I think the challenge we have, I think, this evening is there's a lot of variables that we still don't know. So the OSA funding, which if it comes in at double, which it may be a possibility, maybe a stretch, but if the envelope is double, if ours doubles, that has a major impact on what our needs are for revenue in 2022. The other variable, of course, is the water tower. And Jen, I wonder if you can comment. I mean, we're obviously waiting for the outcome of a funding application for the water tower. And understanding that even if we receive notification of that come Q1 or Q2, probably Q2 next year, that we're still a lot of runway in front of us before we would probably have to put up most of the money for the water tower and the main trunk line improvements. So those are, I guess, some of the factors. I think there's also, we've got ISIP funding, I think, which perhaps another application, which we're waiting for results on. So there's a lot of variables in place right now. So I find it difficult to say which direction we should go with a potential rate increase at this stage, because a lot could change by the time the second draft of the budget rolls around come mid-December. Understanding as well the supplementaries that may come in, hopefully in December, that may also impact. So I'd hate to cut anything today because there's a lot of variables we don't have answers to.
Okay, Mayor Panko, let me just put you on the spot, if I may, because I know you have to leave. Is there an option you would support taking off? For example, maybe the status quo, no rate increase, or the option 4, which is a 3.8% increase. Are you ready, even though with those variables? Is there anything you want to comment on, or on the wastewater 5.5? You know, so is there something you would like to see?
Sure.
Take a, okay.
If it gets looking at trying to pull the details of the report back up here, but essentially a tax rate increase of 3.8 is beyond my threshold. I wouldn't be willing to accept that, or like even the 3.38, I think was the next one down. Absolutely looking. And inflation is obviously another factor right now, because we look at where inflation has been traditionally. We know we're seeing a real spike today, and that may be short-lived or maybe longer-lived. I don't want to make an assumption that that a rate of inflation is going to be 4% and we'll increase our budget 4%. In the future years, if our expenses do continue to increase at that rate, it's going to create a challenge for us. But for now, we don't know how widespread that will be and how long that will be lasting. So I would go towards the lower end on the tax rate increase.
Okay.
And water rates, again, looking at what the variables that have been suggested here, more comfortable with the lower end as well. So probably in that 2 to 3% range.
Okay, thank you. And I hope you don't mind me doing that. It just helps give some direction. And I would ask the rest of you to think that through in your heads. So a final comment to either Mr. Morris or CEO, or Mayor Panko, before you have to leave. Do you want to?
No, I've got probably another 15 minutes roughly, so I'll hang in there and here, listen.
CEO Morris, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, we do have a bit of time, but and to answer your question, I will come back if the meeting's still going when we finish the other one. But I'd just like to make sort of a general statement that you know, there's a lot of space between 1.1 and 3.8. But I would just remind council that roughly 50% of the budget is staffing costs, and you know, we had a lot of employment agreements, collective bargaining this past year, so we're committed to those increases, and they're generally around 2%. So that's a real cost that we need to deal with when it comes to 50% of our operating budget, which is staffing. The other comment I would make, the 1.1 last year was a coup for council, but it's significantly below inflation, and it becomes very regressive to try and run an organization if we're collecting less than what we're experiencing in terms of inflationary pressures. So I would just submit that as a general statement that I get 3.8 as a high number, but 1.1 was, I would suggest, artificially low, given the inflationary pressures we're dealing with today.
Thank you for that input. Treasurer Kazil, you wanted to jump in.
I did. I just want to speak to the mayor's comment about the water tower, and he is correct. If we're unsuccessful with that funding, those will not proceed as we have on the budget, because they weren't actually forecasted to be in that. We just didn't want to take advantage of a grant that was that significant. And our offsetting part is long-term debt, which is in part of the financial plan for the water. So if they don't proceed, it's really isn't going to have any impact, because our shortfall is in the tax supported. Water and wastewater are going to be successful if they were to to approved as presented, they would be fine as far as what are in the reserves right now. It's the tax support that there's shortfalls in.
Thank you, Treasurer Kazil. Okay, now who would like to go follow? Okay, Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the biggest comments I was going to make was covered by CAO Morris, that I don't think we can reasonably look at anything less than the 2% that we have negotiated in several of the union and non-union contracts. So I don't think we should even be thinking about anything less than that. With regard to the Affordable Housing Task Force, I agree with Mayor Panko. At the maximum I would be comfortable with would be 1%. With regard to community donations, I think we have 50,000 left in that right now. So I'm not sure that we need to budget 150 in 2022, but I'm sure my colleagues will have some thoughts on that. And with regard to the hospital donation as well, I am supportive of our hospital, but I'm not necessarily locked into 174. I think it should be a substantial amount, but I'm not necessarily locked at 174. And with regard to the water, wastewater, again, I think that we shouldn't be looking at anything less than 2. I'm not sure how much more than 2 I'm comfortable with, but nothing less than 2 would be my comments right now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I looked at the direction that staff are looking for and have tried to find some neat way of just doing them one at a time, but everything's connected. So if you could follow, if you wish, you could follow Councillor Alford's layout and go through your list in one swoop. That would be great. Councillor Alford, do you have one last comment on that?
Follow up for our treasurer. I was just curious, following up on our discussion over development charges. Is there any part of what could be coming with development charges in 2022 that could impact our thinking with regard to the 22 budget? Now, I know what Councillor Dwyer said, that we should grandfather, but I'm just thinking about what impact this could have in 2022, and would it have any bearing on the 2022 budget? So
it could potentially, through the chair, it could potentially, for instance, the water tower could be part of that. But again, by the time it's actually passed and implementing charges, there may not be, the time to collect on those to make any significant impact.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Who would like to go next? Okay, Councillor Dwyer, jump in, please.
Thank you. Well, so I won't lie, when I first went through the budget, I was of the mindset that the 1.1 was kind of the way to go. But listening to the discussion tonight and being reminded of the prior commitment we had made through our non-union negotiations and union negotiations, quite frankly, I would be agreeable to looking at a 2% increase overall. I think when I look at the tax supported capital summary, I think that there's a lot in there that I would leave to staff to go through and do a second cut of. I can appreciate the rationale of providing it all to council and letting us kind of set the priorities, but I think before we get to that point, I'd like to see staff cut a good chunk out of that to start with. Anything that's not a necessity has not already been contemplated in the strategic plan or long-term financial management plans. I think it doesn't need to be there in this budget. Sorry, number 2, the potential scenarios. Oh, I think I already addressed that, did I not? At 2%. Number 3, the proposed scenarios for various water, wastewater. I'm thinking somewhere between kind of option 2 and option 3 at, again, kind of that 2% mark would be reasonable. Affordable Housing Task Force, I can appreciate what Mayor Pankow is trying to do with the Affordable Housing Task Force. I just think that perhaps it's premature to be included in this budget, given that we don't have a policy framework for implementation. I'd rather see the policy framework upfront, and perhaps that's something that we can blend into the existing reserve funds for our current CIP, or alternatively, we can allocate through community donations on a more annual basis. Number 5, community donations policies. I too, like Councillor Alfred, am hopeful that we won't actually need the full ask, and then perhaps we can proportion some of that elsewhere, whether or not it be to the hospital request for funding or elsewhere. But I will say it's nice to see that, you know, in previous years, we've had substantial requests that far exceed what our community donation allocation has been. And I'll take this as a sign that our community groups are becoming more sustainable and less in need of assistance by the municipality year over year. I think those were all the points. Mr. Chair, did I miss anything?
No, you've nailed it. I'm trying to keep track, and I hope staff are as well. It's that was very succinct. Thank you. I've got Councillor Brennan and then Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, thanks. I'm at the lower end on all fronts, and I've been on council for almost 12 years now. I have never, ever, ever seen a $21 million capital ask, and that's huge. And I know we're leveraging a lot of it, and we need to do that. I appreciate that. But I think we need to drill down a bit into the capital budget, and I've reviewed it, and there's some things in there I think we need to talk about. And I know that Chief Cheersboro's on the line here, but 500 grand for the radio system, I think that might be deferrable. If you'd like to comment on that, Chief.
Through the chair,
yeah.
That question has been raised, Councillor Brennan. The issue has been the radio system was due to be replaced in 2019 from a previous proposal to council. In the last 12 months or more, we've experienced some significant issues and problems with the radio system. When I last reported through a director's report, we had discussed waiting to find out what the Eastern Ontario Regional Network was doing, what the province of Ontario was doing with the FleetNet system, and what the county of Lanark was doing with their radio communications. Since that last report, Lanark County did go out to tender. They come back. It's not, I don't want to say it's incomplete, but it didn't provide the direction as requested by the county or the county chiefs. The province went ahead and renewed the contract with the FleetNet system for communications, which still does not allow municipal fire departments to be part of or take to join. With the ever increasing number of departments that the OPP are discontinuing to dispatch for, our hands are tied. We're limited in our ability to take on additional contracts to offset capital projects. We're in the process of starting by the end of the year to negotiate our new contracts with the county and other departments. When we looked at this proposal, we also incorporated the fact that this would include the next generation 911 system, which is approximately $130,000. So if you take that component off, which we would be scheduled in 2023 to have the next generation system in, that would bring that radio system down significantly. On top of that, we have gone to tender. We had an RFP to have an evaluation of our current system, and given the age of the system, given the component requirements, the recommendation was to replace it. As stated, we've held off for 2 or 3 years, but this is an extremely critical function for the department as well as for the departments we dispatch for.
Okay, thanks.
Do you want to keep going, Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that I'm hoping and praying that we can. I know the CPI is high, and as the mayor remarked, it may not stay high, but it may take some time to come down, and that affects the corporation. But that also affects the people that live in our corporation. So I think it's incumbent on us to try our best to keep things affordable and make sure that people can stay in their houses, i.e. the taxes. And I think that and we all know that the assessment in this town is skewed, and MPAC is not updating anything anytime soon. However, we need to set a mill rate that's affordable. So I'm at the lower rate. I support the hospital donation.
Okay.
The mayor talked about it at, a 2% for the housing task force, but you also talked about, your worship, about tax abatement measures that we could do that would not come off in the bottom line. I'm supportive of that. And so I would task staff to keep working. You're doing a great job, but we need to have a bottom line for the people of this town that is affordable and not pricing them out of their houses. Even without a mortgage, it's still expensive to live. And so we need to pull up our boots and make the best we can. So I'm at the lower end of everything.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you.
Councillor McGuire was next.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I agree with Mayor Panko that not to cut anything tonight. I think that in past years, we've had these deep discussions into different items, but then as we get more information, it ends up being not needed because we end up finding more money or things seem to fall into place with grants. I agree with Councillor Brennan's comment on the MPAC inequality in town of what houses are actually being sold for versus what the assessment's worth. And whether or not we were to raise the taxes by 1% or 4%, we're talking about a $345,000 spread on a $26 million budget. So it's really, I don't think it's going to save the day as much as we might want to talk about it. What I'm really interested to see, and I don't know, Treasurer Kozil, if this is something we could get access to, is how the tax burden is distributed between different neighborhoods, i.e. what the average house price would be in the different neighborhoods of town, so we can see how tax increase would affect certain neighborhoods differently. I know I live in a part of town that's, or at least my house is very close to the average. So it wouldn't affect me the same way it would affect somebody on Ferreira in one of those new townhouses that's paying significant more taxes than I am. Is that something that we have the data for? Or?
Director or Treasurer Cosio, do you want to?
Yes. Chair, I know the information I have. Obviously, we don't have an assessment, so it's 2016 based on 2016 assessment. And I did go through to see the range of properties and the values.
Sorry, Janet, that interference came back again. We just couldn't make it out. Thanks.
So I did go through to see the values and the ranges. Most starting in 200 to 300. I'm sorry, 100 to 200. Over 2,000. Ranged between 200 to 600, 673. 300 to 400, 101. Again, these are 2016 assessments. And 106 units. 26 within that new subdivision that you referred to.
Thanks, Janet. I may ask you to send that out to us separately, because for whatever reason, you're coherent, but the technology is not. Okay. Sorry, Janet.
I can send that out.
Thank you. Councillor McGuire, back to you. I've got a sense you're not done yet.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So I'll go through the items now. With item 1 in the tax supported capital summary, I'd really like us to take a deep dive into that, because obviously we're going to have to, things are going to have to happen there, but I'm okay if that doesn't happen tonight, because there's still so many outstanding pieces of information available. Item 2, in normal times, I would be supportive of option 3, but because of that inequality between assessments, I'd like to see how it's distributed by neighborhood and see what that's actually going to look like for people before committing to it. I think option 2 is too low, so somewhere maybe an option 2.5 or something like that's in order. Same with the wastewater rates. I've noticed that as we've been diligently increasing them, and I think it's really great that you pay the full cost of water in your water bill, but we're not decreasing the tax burden equivalent at the same rate. So I noticed that we're getting towards the top of that. We're inching our way up that list of comparable municipalities. So something closer to 2% there I'd be more comfortable with. Item 4 with the Affordable Housing Task Force 2% request. In my opinion, this funding should come out of future revenues. When we look at the program 4 for the CIP with the tax abatement, I think that's going to be one of the most effective tools for this, but we don't have the study and we don't have a lot of information. So I don't support earmarking 2%, but I do support getting that policy in place and having that funding coming out of future revenues. The same with the development charges. There's some big questions from tonight that are still unanswered. Community donations, I'd like to see what comes in, and I'd like to cut it off at the first intake this year, so that if you don't have the application in this round, then we say, okay, this is what we're going to give out, and if there's 49,000 left, like there was last year, we can reallocate that, and it'll bring a bit back to the budget. Item 6, hospital donation, hold off on commenting on that until we have more information, and I think that gets me through everything. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. Who wants to go next? Councillor Allen, why don't you?
I certainly would like to keep the rates close to 1, but I agree with my colleagues. I think both of them, tax increase and wastewater and proposed water rates, I would be okay closer to 2%. I guess the other thing is the fact that we're waiting. There is, as my colleagues have said, so much more information to come in. I'm hoping that we get some better available money, but the Affordable Housing Task Force, I sit on that and I see the need. And I think we've been together long enough that we are looking at ways that we can help our community become more affordable. But at the same time, I don't agree with the 2%, especially having gone through this budget. I would be probably closer to 1, or as some of my colleagues said, maybe waiting until we see how all of this falls out. The community donations, again, I would be agreeable to making that less. The hospital donation, I am not. I would like to keep it the way it is, the ask that they have. And I think that's all of it, if I haven't missed anything.
That's
the only other thing that I would like to share, or just have people think about. Years ago, in fact, it's not that long ago, we used to have a morning, I think it was a Saturday morning, Councillor Brennan, if you remember. We used to go through the line items. And tonight we're all looking at some of these big items, like Councillor Brennan brought up one, and I have several that I looked at and I thought, like, can we really not just put that off? And that going to go through the items and doing it together and having the person that was asking for it legitimize whether it was needed or not in this particular year. This is going to be a difficult budget year. And I just think having that sort of thing to be able to do together with the person that's asking it was really helpful. And as much as it was giving up some of our personal time, I think it was a really useful way of doing it.
Yeah, it's a good point. Councillor Brennan,
Yeah, I'll comment on that. And I totally agree. I mean, we don't want, I hate sort of to get into weeds about stuff, especially operational things, but it speaks to transparency. And when I'm looking at a capital budget of $21 million, I mean, I almost fell off my chair. So we've got that. I think that it's incumbent on all of us to have a look at that capital, those capital items, and get some. Do we really need it this year? So I agree with you, Lorraine. Good comments.
So Treasurer Kozil, and then I'll make some comments.
Your comments as the operational line by line variance summary for schedule 4.
Yeah, I think I heard that, yes, in Schedule 4, there is a line-by-line summary available.
So by all means, if you have questions, all staff are here this evening. Some of the big ticket items you did want an explanation for, they are here to do just that.
Yes, okay. And I don't know if the group, I certainly participated Friday in a half-day budget day at County Council. And we walked through the slides and staff got up and made a presentation. I did appreciate, it's one of the few times council does get into the weeds and everybody restrains themselves. We didn't get down into paper towel purchases, but we did see what miscellaneous means, and we did see it allows a discussion. I don't know, I wasn't around in the old days like old Mr. Brennan, but it is something that it does work, and the county's still using it. And I don't know if it's possible. Yes, Janet, please.
Just going to suggest if that's council's direction, we can certainly have that for the second draft.
So this council, would you have time, and would you appreciate let's say up to 3 hours? I'm seeing nods. Yeah, Janet, there is an appetite for that, and Councillor Dwyer is going to get back in here, please.
Thank you. Yeah, and I noticed Wendy's hand is up as well. I don't mind doing a 3-hour capital review, but I think at this point, 21 million, there's got to be some priorities from staff before we take a look at it. I think presenting a $21 million capital budget is completely unrealistic, and I think we're all acknowledging that. So I'd rather see staff take an initial cut, and then we come back with the refinements by council to make those really hard choices about additional projects that may need to be cut.
Okay, Councillor Alford, I apologize if I didn't see you there. Go ahead.
No, I echo what Councillor Dwyer has said over capital. I differ from some of my colleagues in going line by line in operations budgets. I mean, I'll go along for the 3-hour ride if you wish to analyze every single line in operations, but I think it's unnecessary. And again, my goal would be what number do you want, and have staff go back and find it, not us going through each line. What number do you want, and let them decide where they need to remove things, and they know their priorities within their departments, and one can be linked to another. So I'm not in favor of going through line by line in operations, but if that's the consensus of council, I'll go along for the ride.
I'll just speak to, if I may, just speak to my experience this week at county. They give you a high level, but it's each department. No one on county council, and I'm not sure how it worked in Smith Falls, went through line by line. But what it did is allow to see where that total number, what it adds up to, and it gave you a better insight into the operations. And for the most part, always council agreed, county council understood better why that number was coming forward. So on my thoughts on well, I don't want to give you a summary. I'm hearing there is an interest in having some sort of a session on capital. I will say something about capital, and it is a large number. There's no other way of saying that 21 million. However, this 5 years ago, the 10 probably would have looked like 20 today. So the dollar figure is an inflated because of the capital cost. It's a lot of money, but there's nothing outrageous about it. It's probably, a few years ago, it would have been the same as 10 or 15 million. So some of it is just the increased cost of doing business. Still is 21 million. Got it. My thoughts are, I think we're reaching a consensus, other than Councillor Brennan, who wanted to stay, he didn't say on the lowest, he said towards the lower on those items. And I'm not hearing anybody pushing for 3.8 or 5.5 on the water and wastewater on the high end. What come up time and time again is something like 2 or 2.5%. I'm talking about on the tax rate increase, and the same around the water. I've heard that, and there seems to be consensus there. It's not quite the lowest, but it's not the highest. They're choosing the middle. I've heard that there is support for the Housing Task Force to come back with a CIP, and that there's many ways of supporting that without putting 2% in. I've heard that there's other creative ways, future revenue. There were other ideas about supporting them without necessarily, so I didn't see an appetite for 2% at all for that. And on the community donations, my take is people are still interested. I think the point was from Councillor McGuire that we have one intake only. I suspect with the election, by July, we won't have time for another intake anyway. Staff council will be in a different world and not making those decisions at that time. I do support the hospital donation. If at the end, I would like to get everything done and give them as close to 174, but I'm not opposed to going down a little bit on that. So if my summary was close to it, I have at least 4 or 5 people have mentioned the 2 or the 2.5, and with Councillor Brennan saying low, but 2 is not far off of a 1.1. So he may be moving yet. I don't know.
I'd be interested in the discussion on capital and then take it from there. I mean, everything's going up for everyone, so.
Okay.
Let's get sharp pencils.
Treasurer Kozia, we're in the middle around the rate and wastewater. And then you've heard the comments around the Housing Task Force, not yet, and but some other creative ways. And then community donations was pretty much status quo, and as much as we can get to the hospital up to 174. But there is an interest in unpacking that capital and having a conversation or a dedicated time to do that. Does that give you the information? And then, of course, that long list of variables that you pointed out, we may know more. Your dates again, I think it was the 13th of December where we would be back, and we hope that more information would be coming forward. So between now and then, could we have a discussion on those capital items, and those who are able to and want to participate, they can? Does that give you enough time to put something like that together? Yes, Janet?
Turn off my video, sorry. So what I'm hearing is you want to see a scenario brought forward for 2% and leave the 1.1 on the table because there has been some interest in that and the others are gone to the wayside. The affordable housing, there's nothing on this draft. For now, leave that off the table and that we'll discuss that at second draft. Currently, there's 150 for the community donations. Did you want me to lower that, or there is approximately 49,000 sitting still available for 2021? I can transfer that over, so the net impact to the 2022 is less than 49,000. So that I would like direction on if I could. And for now, leave the 174 in there for the hospital for further discussion. Do I have that? And staff are to review the capital and hopefully decrease that before second draft.
And yeah, I saw a lot of nodding heads. It was, I think there would be no disagreement in bringing forward the 49 from this fiscal year into next. And then that figure would be closer to 100,000 in 2022, I guess. I saw it nodding. Councillor McGuire?
Yeah, that was a great summary. My only one was I didn't see a consensus for the 1.1%. So just for the sake of brevity, we could take that out. I'd almost rather see a 2% and a 3% or a 2% and a 3.8.
I did see, I did, you're right. There was no consensus for 1.1. But I'm respectful of Councillor Brennan's comments, the lower. He didn't name it, but he didn't say the lowest. So if
I'll say the lowest.
All right, he said it. So there is at least one person wants to see that brought forward. I think I hear much greater consensus for 2, 2.5, and Councillor McGuire 3 and 3. Would you like to see those 3 costed and look at them on December the 13th? Does that narrow it any further for you, Janet, or is it not really? It's just a spread a little different.
In all fairness, it's on a spreadsheet. I'll just change the percentage. So if you want to see 2, 2.5, and 3, then I'll just change what you're seeing tonight, which was the 1.1,
Okay.
3.38. Just
Okay.
wanted, sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could clarify a few other things. The other thing I wanted just to confirm, and I think you did indicate you want to see staff do a presentation, small presentation for their operational increases on the next version of the budget. Is that correct?
Well, I heard for sure for capital. I didn't,
Not
there was not consensus on the operational side. And it's 50% staff wages. So, what are we going to do,
One of the things, sorry, one of the things that was just brought to my attention is part of that 49,000. Sorry, I hear you're struggling. Part of the 49,000 that's left in 2021, apparently they had a last minute application that they're just reviewing. So that may not be there and available to transfer into 2022, but we'll certainly have that by the next draft.
Okay. Councillor McGuire.
Just one last comment. Great first draft meeting, but anything less than 3.8% is essentially a cut, and I'm okay with that cut because everybody's seeing these increases right now with inflation. But what we're really looking at is a 2.7% to a 1.8% cut from the status quo. And I think when we focus the language on the increase, it really skews the reality that the wages are going up, the fuel's going up, the cost of materials are going up. So really everything is going to be a relative cut based on tonight's discussion from this year's tax burden.
That's a really good point, Councillor McGuire. Insurance costs are going up. Everything is, and it's just a different way to look at it for sure. So thank you for bringing that to everyone. And it's the same with the water, wastewater. 5 point something is really where we need to be. And by not doing that, we're just kicking that can down the road. But we understand that today in this climate is not the time to introduce that level of increases to the ratepayers. Or I think we all understand that. And I'll go back one more time to Treasurer Kozeel. You've got what you wanted, and council's been able to express their opinions. We've reached a consensus. We're not far off. Is that we're okay to move off of this now? That's terrific. And members of the public watching, please look at those dates. There is a public meeting December 1st. We'd love to have as many people involved as possible. And then we'll be back here on December 13th to get closer to finalizing this budget. Thank you all. You've been absolutely wonderful as usual. So that brings us to the adjournment. I have a motion that the committee adjourn its proceedings at 7:19 p.m. and stand so adjourned until the next duly called committee meeting. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor McGuire. Before you leave, we're going to take 5 minutes and or 10, maybe Mayor Penko will be back and save you all from me. But if he's not, I'll be here in 5 minutes, ready as your acting mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Allen, can you do miscellaneous motion 8.1 tonight on the council agenda? That's the award of the RFP for the Confederation Drive environmental assessment.
You're muted, Lorraine.
I got your text. Thank you, Nadine.
No problem. And I've got, oh, wait for the other people to come up.
Wendy. And 8.1 is Alan. And Nadine, are they getting their seconders lined up?
Not yet. We have Councillor Brennan doing 7.1, but I don't see him on here. And we have Councillor Alfred, but she has left the meeting, so I'm not sure where she's gone. We'll just wait to see if she comes back on.
Well, let me just, okay. And then Councillor Allen agreed to do 8.1.
Yes.
I need a seconder though.
Yeah, that's for the.
You can do it, Lorraine.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Chris.
McGuire.
Thank you.
Okay. So once we have those, we'll be ready to go. Councillor Brennan, if you're good enough, you'll do 7.1 and you just need a seconder. The ATV one. You're on mute, Jay.
Sorry, 7.1,
Yep.
which is,
The ATV.
oh yeah, I'll do
bylaw.
that.
A seconder.
Seconder.
What's the breakdown of these two? Like this one is for the house to trail and the other one's for the actual route through town, or how are those split up?
So the 7.1 is with respect to the whole changes to allow all-terrain vehicles in Smith Falls. The second one is the agreement for like it's a trail access agreement that we have with Rideau Lakes ATV for the
So
trail.
Which one should I vote no to?
The second one.
Second one is the actual, yeah, the route.
The first one's just confirming the
Permission.
the trial that we had, right?
It's passing a bylaw to allow them to use the town streets.
Yeah.
From here on. Yes, Councillor Alfred. Do you have a seconder? You're on mute. You're on mute.
I don't want to move 7.2 because I'm likely to vote against it.
Oh,
okay.
Okay, let's see, who else do we have on here that, so we have Councillor Dwyer, would you support that one? The trail access agreement for the lakes or ATV?
Yes.
Okay.
I can't, sorry, I'm losing my headphones. They're dying. I just have to go find another.
Would someone second 7.2?
I will.
Jay Brennan. Thank you, Jay.
And who got mine? Wendy, right?
Sure.
7.1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, to go forward with the trial and make it permanent is a good idea. I support that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Then and we're good to go then.
Who's got the other one, or who's got the RFP?
The RFP is with Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor McGuire, I believe is the support she got.
Sorry, and I think I missed part of that. So I'm moving 7.2. Who's my seconder?
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you.
So whenever we're ready,
Okay.
I'm ready.
All right, we will go live with this council meeting at 7:26 at 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Smith Falls Council meeting on November 22nd. I'm Peter McKenna. I'm your acting mayor tonight as Mayor Penko sends his regrets for this part of the meeting. I'm going to open the meeting with the land acknowledgement. And on November 22nd, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, we are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for the contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We're mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on our strength and our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. So I'm calling the meeting to order. As I mentioned, the only regrets we have are Mayor Panko, and CAO Morris is not with us right at this moment. Is there any disclosure of monetary interest? Seeing none, we have no delegations, no adoption of the minutes, and I don't believe we have any reports, but I don't know that. Any reports? No. So we're moving. Oh, sorry, Councillor McGuire, did you have a report?
Yeah, thanks, Acting Mayor. The MHC met last week, and we discussed the town hall renovation and and we're also discussing the RED grant, but that was postponed to a future meeting. I think I just want to share my frustration with, we were hoping to postpone that meeting until this week, but we went through with it because we were told that that was going to be on the agenda tonight. So just, I just wanted to make everyone aware of that and share my appreciation for the committee. And I hope that we'll be able to talk about the town hall renovation at the next meeting of committee of the whole.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Brennan, did you want to have a report as well? No?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one report on behalf of the Rideau Environmental Action League. So as council may have seen in the draft capital budget prepared for tonight's committee of the whole discussion, one of the most considerable factors that the Rideau Environmental Action League is contending with right now is a substantial expenditure required to make their building usable. The breakdown of the building assessment has been included in the capital budget for consideration by council so that we can provide staff direction on how we'd like to proceed with that. But there is a sizable amount of work that needs to be done to that building, including the replacement of the roof at almost $362,000, as well as a bare minimum $9,000, I believe, in electrical upgrades and security requirements. So I say this because this is something that REAL is really struggling with right now. They recognize that this is a huge ask to the municipality, both as their landlord and as a community donor to their organization. REAL is going to be filing a delegation request to present their position on the financial request as part of the budget process. So they have been advised of our upcoming public meeting on December 1st and are trying to schedule a meeting with Mr. Manhire to discuss the building assessment in more detail, although unfortunately they've been put off twice now to schedule that meeting. Our hope was that that would be something that would occur prior to December 1st, but it seems unlikely at this point. So hopefully as part of the budget meeting, we'll get a better idea of kind of what their position on the life tenancy of that building is, and we can consider that in our final financial decisions.
Thank you. Any other reports? I'll just add that I attended the Lanark County budget meeting on Friday. They're looking at a 3% increase, and our friends at the county budget, it's just under $100 million. It's $99 million. $99 million. $99 million. Anyway, the good news in there is the government has announced that I had been keeping council abreast of the Lanark Lodge redevelopment, and it's a Class B. All nursing homes are rated. Class A is number one. Lanark Lodge is Class B, and initially they had to upgrade to Class A by 2025. That requirement now for municipally owned Class B nursing homes has been removed. So there's not the pressure to come up with a plan and build a building in the next 4 years and fund it. So it will still be on the agenda, but some of that pressure's off. So I thought you would be interested in that. Okay, moving on to our bylaws. 7.1, I think, is with Councillor Brennan.
It is. Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Alfred, that a bylaw to amend bylaw 10075/2019 being a bylaw to regulate the operation of all train vehicles on municipal highways within the town of Smith Falls be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Okay. It's been, and then just checking in one more time with Deputy Clerk Bennett. This is where I read it and then ask for discussion. Correct. So it's been moved by Councillor Brennan and seconded by Councillor Alfred that a bylaw to amend bylaw 10075/2019 being a bylaw to regulate the operation of all terrain vehicles on municipal highways within the town of Smith Falls be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? That's carried. And Councillor Brennan, would you like to just any discussion on that?
Yeah, we just had a discussion at our COW meeting a little while ago about this, and I want to thank I think it's the Rideau Lakes ATV Club and Rick Gilfillan who brought this forward to us back in 2019 about connecting the trails, and the way that they could do that is use certain streets in town, and we did a pilot project. And it's worked out very well. They're very respectful. They follow the rules, and actually, it brings people into town. So we're going to make that permanent with this bylaw. And thanks to all their work and cooperation with us.
Thank you. May I have the third reading, please?
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Alfred, that a bylaw to amend bylaw 10075/2019, being a bylaw to regulate the operation of all train vehicles on municipal highways within the town of Smith Falls be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10278/2021.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Brandon, seconded by Councillor Alfred, that a bylaw to amend bylaw 10075/2019, being a bylaw to regulate the operation of all terrain vehicles on municipal highways within the town of Smith Falls, be received and read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10278/2021. Any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 7.2 is with Councillor Dwyer, I believe.
Yes,
Another
thank you,
bylaw.
Mr. Chair. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Brennan that a bylaw to amend bylaw 10076/2019, being a bylaw to authorize execution of a trail access agreement with the Rideau Lakes ATV Club, be received and read a first time and taken and read a second time.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Dwyer and seconded by Councillor Brennan that a bylaw to amend bylaw 10076/2019, being a bylaw to authorize execution of trail access agreement with the Rideau Lakes ATV Club, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? That's carried. Discussion, Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. So in conjunction with the bylaw that Councillor Brennan just presented, this is the actual authorization agreement with the Rideau Lakes ATV Club to they're within the town limits. I think perhaps Deputy Clerk Bennett can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the explanation that Councillor Brennan gave for his bylaw is actually the explanation deserving for this bylaw, whereas his former bylaw was actually to recognize ATVs of any ownership on all municipal highways, whereas our previous arrangement only allowed for them on certain streets as part of the connectivity along the Cataraqui Trail. So now the amendment that we brought forward as part of the first bylaw, will allow riders to use municipal streets between their home and the trail itself. And again, the bylaw that we are contemplating right now is for the Rideau Lakes ATV Club specifically to operate within the town limits.
Deputy Clerk Bennett, is that again confirmed your understanding?
That's my understanding. Director McMunn's also on the line if he'd like to comment any further on these two reports.
And I know any other discussion, Councillor McGuire?
Thanks. Director McMahon, did you have a comment first or?
Yeah, the intent of the amending bylaw for the, sorry, just give me a second here. Yeah, for the first bylaw, 10075-2019. So that original bylaw does have prescribed streets within town that that does permit for ATVs to travel on those roadways. The amending bylaw would, I guess, append the schedule within that particular bylaw to allow for streets within town with the exception of arterial roads. So everything other than Brockville Street, Lombard Street, and the likes of those streets were major arteries within town. So every other street within town would be permitted. The second bylaw, or the second amending bylaw to 10076-2019, that's where the bylaw itself is going to make permanent the current agreement or update the agreement with the Rideau Lakes ATV Club to have access through town lands. So that would be the section of the Cataraqui Trail and the area the compost site off Highway 43, just as it stands right now, making that permanent access.
Thank you for the clarification. And I know we all understood that. I appreciate it. Councillor McGuire, you had a comment on this?
Yeah, thank you. I'll be voting against this tonight because there's a fall hazard that hasn't been addressed. When we look at my background with this stuff is more from the workplace. So when I look at the Occupational Health and Safety Act, there's 5 hazard recognition points for a dangerous fall or a fatal fall. It's falling from a height of more than 3 meters, falling into water or another liquid, and falling through an opening in a work surface. So 60% of the 5 are covered at this site. And we've identified this hazard multiple times in the past and nothing's been done about it. Not only is it falling into water, but it's fast moving water above a water control structure. It's very dangerous, especially for young kids, and it's getting to be a more and more popular spot in town. I think that as we look at our insurance costs skyrocketing, it's because municipalities are named time and time again in lawsuits for this kind of thing, where they're not directly associated with it, but they've got an indirect connection, and that's why these fees are going up. And I do think we have a duty of care here. I don't think passing this right now is prudent, and I can't in good conscience support it until something's done. So I don't think this solution is overly complicated. I've seen the same style of bridge on the KMP, OVRT. I wouldn't be surprised if other spots in the Cataraqui Trail have this solution where they need to take some lumber, put it up on the angle iron, and seal that off. And if we don't do something now as a municipality, we've washed our hands of it, and we're not going to have another opportunity to. So as much as I support this and I look forward to it passing when the season's closing at the end of the month, I would like to see something happen over the winter and get this fixed for the spring. So I'll be voting no tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Alford, did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I can't support this right now. I know this is not a municipal responsibility, but it has been brought to our horseshoe. And since it is at the horseshoe, I feel it would be irresponsible to invite people with this bylaw to go across something that is not safe. So I'm sure between Rideau Lakes, OVRT, if we can find the owner, or we just take action under some kind of property standards to fix this, one way or another, it'll get addressed. But right now, I don't feel it's responsible for us to go ahead and invite people to go across an unsafe bridge.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, coincidentally, I've received an email this evening from Rick Gilfillan. He's actually watching the proceedings of tonight's meeting. He had mentioned that that the Rideau Lakes ATV Club did consult with Parks Canada, being the owner of the structure, with 2 years ago, to no avail. They did not get, I guess, cooperation from Parks Canada in so much that it was referred to their engineering department, and they did not permit any alterations to the structure itself. That being said, the Rideau Lakes ATV Club, I guess I would have to prove to be corrected, but I presume they have an arrangement agreement with Parks Canada to use that structure in the first place. However, Rick did mention that he will take a look at it again. So I myself, I extended an invite to Rick to take a look at it at some point later in this week, because I have not seen the bridge myself, so I'll get a look at it myself.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, one more, Councillor McGuire.
Just ask for a recorded vote, please.
Yeah, recorded vote's been asked for. I just, if I may, as your acting mayor, that we have not determined, other than through Councillor McGuire, that there is an actual hazard there. And we have some understanding that Parks Canada may own it, but that's not been confirmed. So I would like the information about that to come back at another meeting, just who owns it and what indeed is the hazard and what's the remedy. Having said that, I'm going to read it for a third time. So the recommended motion by
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The moving councillor reads it for a third time.
Yes, they do. Thank you. Point of order. I appreciate that. So again, Councillor Dwyer, would you please do that for me?
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Brennan that the bylaw to amend bylaw 10076-2019, being a bylaw to authorize execution of a trail access agreement with the Rideau Lakes ATV Club, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10279-2021.
Thank you. So it has been moved by Councillor Dwyer and seconded by Councillor Brennan that a bylaw to amend bylaw 10076-2019, being a bylaw to authorize execution of a trail access agreement with the Rideau Lakes ATV Club, be now read a third time, finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10279-2021, and a recorded vote has been requested. Deputy Clerk Bennett.
With respect to bylaw 10279-2021, please state yay or nay. Councillor Alford?
Nay.
Councillor Allen?
Yay.
Councillor Brennan?
Yay.
Councillor Dwyer?
Yay.
Councillor McGuire?
Nay.
Councillor McKenna, Acting Mayor McKenna?
Yay.
And Mayor Penko is absent. This bylaw is carried.
Thank you. Miscellaneous motions 8.1. I think it's moved by Councillor Allen.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McGuire that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls award RFP 21 PW 020 to McIntosh Perry Consulting Engineers Limited for professional services for the municipal class environmental assessment for the Confederation Drive River crossing. And further, that council authorized the mayor and the clerk to executive a contract agreement with McIntosh Perry Consulting Engineers Limited for the amount of $86,311.81, including net HST.
Thank you. Discussion, Councillor Allen.
Yes, we had a consultant company and look at this in 2020 or 2020, and they were looking at the state of the bridge that was there, and a structural analysis was done. This time we're asking the company that was chosen, and it was McIntosh Perry Consulting. There were 5 submissions, but theirs was the most sympathetic and had the highest score. And so what we're hoping with public engagement and involvement in this, that we're going to have an informed decision on how we move forward, whether it's vehicular, pedestrian, or both. And we can put back a crossing on the bridge, where the bridge stands now.
Any further discussion on this? Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor McGuire, that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls award RFP 21-PW-020 to Macintosh Perry Consulting Engineers for professional services for the municipal class environmental assessment for the Confederation Drive River crossing. And further, that council authorized the mayor and clerk to execute a contract agreement with Macintosh Perry Consulting Engineering Limited for the amount of $86,311.81, including HST. All in favor? That motion's carried. I think the final motion we have, any inquiries or announcements tonight? Councillor Alfred.
Yes, acting worship, acting mayor. This is Small Business Week, and you may have seen the signs that the Chamber and the DBA have deployed in and around downtown and on the highways. Just want to remind everybody to think local, dine local, shop local. Small Business Saturday is on November 27th. And small business is the heart of this town, or many towns like ours. And shopping locally can go a long way to undoing some of the damage that the pandemic has done. So I encourage everyone to shop locally.
Thank you very much. Great suggestion. I did neglect to tell you when I was giving you the brief update on county council budget that the overall share for Smith Falls has gone down significantly due to a variety of factors, which I won't get into, but we're talking some very substantial savings across the board for us. So if anybody would like to see what that is, go to the county website and look at their budget and you'll see Smith Falls. Councillor Allen, you wanted to announce?
I just have a quick update about the Railway Museum's Polar Express. We ran very successfully on Saturday. Santa was there and talked to many children and families. They did it 3 runs with 6 people in the run for each hour. So there were like over 18 people there, and they were from Toronto, Brockville, Winchester. I didn't get to talk to all of them, so I'm not sure, but it was a very successful day, and we're looking forward to having 3 more of these Saturdays.
All aboard. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Allen. We have an adjournment with Councillor McGuire.
Councillor Dwyer.
Sorry, Councillor Dwyer, I missed that. And seconded by Councillor McGuire. Apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McGuire that this council adjourn its proceedings at 7:50 and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council.
Okay, thank you. It's do I repeat that? I think I do. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, seconded by Councillor McGuire that this council adjourn its proceedings at 7. What is it again? As
50 and 7:50.
7:50 and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council. All in favor? Thank you, and thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. See you next week.
Good evening.